Good evening, everybody. Welcome to meeting of full council this evening. I'd just like to remind everyone of the housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please indicate that you wish to do so to myself or my vice chair, and please also stand if you're able to when addressing the council. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top. Please also remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking. It's particularly important that all members use their microphones so that the audio can be picked up for the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the fire evacuation point outside. I would also like to remind you that this meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. I would politely remind all members that due to the nature of the council's camera and microphone tracking systems, it's possible that you may appear on camera at times, even when you may not necessarily be addressing the council. For example, when the cameras are panning across the room or a colleague in your vicinity is speaking. Please be mindful of this at all times and act appropriately, including the use of mobile phones. Do we have any apologies this evening?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got apologies from Councillors Clark, Criswell, Dew, Gardner, Mockball, Wells and Welton.
Thank you. We are joined this evening in the public gallery by family and friends of Huntingdonshire resident and cycling campaigner Mike Goff, who tragically lost his life in a road collision earlier this month. Mike was a former employee of the District Council and was one of the founder members of the Hunts Walking and Cycling Group, and an enthusiastic advocate for more cycle infrastructure and safer streets, and enjoyed sharing his love of cycling with others at events and on local social rides. I would like to say that the council's thoughts are with his family, friends and former colleagues at this very sad time. I would just like to adjourn the meeting for a moment to allow the family, if they would like to leave or to continue to stay with the rest of the meeting. Thank you. To continue, I'd now like to invite Councillor Paul Hodgson-Jones to present our thought for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, we are assembled here today on the Wednesday of Holy Week, midway between Christ's triumphant entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday and his passion, death and resurrection at Easter. So how did the people of Jerusalem go from this to this in the space of just a few days? Well, the answer to that question lies in the deliberations of a council somewhat like ours. The Sanhedrin met at least twice this week, first to approve a payment of 30 silver pieces from the treasury to Judas Iscariot, and then again for the trial of Jesus. So let us imagine how we would have behaved were we present at those council meetings. Did we sing Hosanna or shout, "Crucify him"? Would we have been fearful of an outsider usurping our power? Would we have been keen to protect our privileges? Would we be willing to spend public money for improper purposes? Would we be willing to distort and exaggerate to further our own ambitions, as some of those false witnesses did? Would we be too timid to speak out and hide in corners, like Nathanael, who only went to Jesus in the dead of night? Would we go with the flow for an easy life? Would we allow a higher government authority to take the blame for our actions? After all, do most people remember Caiaphas and Annas or Pontius Pilate when asked about who was responsible for the crucifixion? While the Sanhedrin in 29 AD might seem a long way and a long time ago, there are parallels for us to ponder here and now in this chamber as to how we conduct ourselves as councillors. And at this time of year, I thought that would be appropriate. And after a moment's reflection, I'd like to finish with a small prayer. Dear Lord and Father of mankind, as we gather together in this chamber, grant us the wisdom to discern what is best for our residents and serve them faithfully. Guide us in our deliberations. Teach us to discern right from wrong. Give us the courage to stand up and bear witness to the truth. Remind us that we are servants of the people, not their masters, and that we should put their needs above our own. Grant us the strength to carry our responsibilities without complaint, and may we behave with dignity at all times. Amen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Item 2 in the agenda is the minutes of the last meeting. Subject to the replacement of an initial N with the initial A for Councillor Jennings in the second paragraph of minutes number 23/59. Is everyone agreed that I sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of February as a correct record? Item 3, members' interests. Are there any interests that members would like to declare in relation to any agenda item this evening? No. Thank you. Item number 4, Chair and Vice Chair's engagements and announcements. I would like to take this opportunity to formally announce the resignation of ex-councillor Richard West as District Councillor for Great Paxton. Richard had served as a district councillor for 18 consecutive years, and I'm sure that you will all agree that this will be a great loss to us. And it's very odd, actually, that the chair is empty over there and he's not pulling a face. Owing to his notable and distinguished service to the council, group leaders have agreed to convey the title of Honorary Alderman to Richard, and this will be undertaken at a future meeting of the council. A by-election for the Great Paxton seat will be held on the 2nd of May 2024, combined with the election for the Police and Crime Commissioner for Cambridgeshire. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the departure of Paul Fox, who was appointed to us as the Interim Corporate Director for People, who will be leaving the authority at the end of this month, tomorrow. Paul was appointed in February 2023 as the Interim Corporate Director to provide support to Oliver Morley during his time as the Interim MD until the appointment of Michelle as our permanent Chief Executive, and his support to the wider senior leadership team pending the appointment of the new Corporate Director of Place. Therefore, I would like to place on record the gratitude of the Council to Paul for his support to us all during this transitional period. There is a list of engagements on page 21 within your agenda. So we will move on. Item number 5, questions from members of the public. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 10.1, we haven't received any questions prior to this evening, and therefore we will move on to the next agenda item. And that is the Corporate Plan Refresh 2024. Which starts on page 23 within your agenda pack, and Councillor Comboy, our Executive Leader, will now present the refreshed corporate plan and propose the recommendations contained in the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought I'd come and stand at the front because then I can see you all smiling. I'm very pleased to be able to bring to you tonight the refreshed corporate plan for this council. It belongs to each and every one of us, and thank you, Councillor Hodgson-Jones, for reminding us of our purpose for being here. It is for the residents that we serve. So you will know that the corporate plan is a working document, and it guides the work that we do throughout the council. It gives our officers very clear direction, and it links to our performance management. remember that when we use the document as part of our core daily work, we sometimes struggle with some of the wording. And so therefore tonight before you is the proposition that we're going to make one of the ways of phrasing our key reasons for working a little snappier. And we're going to talk about doing our business well. So we're not changing the meaning of what we're doing. We're just going to make it a little bit shorter so that when somebody says, and what do we do? It rolls off the tongue a little bit easier. So that's going to be one of the aims that we currently have, but we're just going to shorten and tighten the wording just so it's easier for everybody on a day-to-day basis. We also are bringing to you tonight the recommendation to change the wording around carbon emissions. And again, this is a very minor change to the wording, but actually it's a really important one. Because when we set out the wording, we said that we wanted to improve the carbon emissions for the council. We actually want to improve the carbon emissions for the whole of Huntingdonshire. So we're actually suggesting we remove a word and we make the ambition bigger, because actually we think that's the right thing to do, and we're well on our way to managing to bring that to fruition. So it's a stretch objective, and it better reflects what we're trying to achieve. There are also some additions to reflect our do, enable and influence approach. Or should I say the other way around, because we're starting to realise that influence, enable, do probably speaks more to how we're working. And you'll note that we're now articulating the new approach in how we're talking about supporting our residents, and particularly the idea of community wealth building. In line with how we work and communicate with our residents, we will feed back continually as a we said, we did, and I think that's a very welcome addition to how we're reporting, and we'll continue to do that. So we make it very clear as a council what we said we would do, the conversations we've had with our residents, and then what we're doing directly as a result of that. You'll also note that we propose to amend some of our key performance indicators. Now you'll know that these are live measures, and they tell us how we're doing. But in some cases, they're easy in the sense of we've achieved them or we haven't. But actually, we want to know more than that around some of our performance indicators. So there's a stretch measure involved in the work that we're doing. In particular, I'd like to draw your attention to, we picked up comments that have been shared in overview and scrutiny, and we've particularly picked up the issues around our workforce and our workforce strategy, which is emerging as we speak. It's being co-produced with staff, but you'll note now that we're looking at sickness absence as part of our performance measures, so we can better understand how we can support our workforce to be able to do the work that they're delivering on behalf of our residents. And finally, we know that the Office of Local Government, Oflog, will require us to collect and provide a range of data and evidence to demonstrate how we're delivering value for money for the public and how we're performing. We're not waiting for it to be a requirement. We're on the front foot. A lot of that data we already collect, but we think there's new data that actually would help us to demonstrate our value for money and focus our attention on our delivery. So you'll notice that we're moving in that direction, and this will also enable more efficient benchmarking of what we do as a council. We want to identify the areas of strength and the areas for development proactively, so that we embed that work across the council. In other words, we don't want to wait to be told. We want to be on the front foot because we know what we want to improve and where we're going. And we want to also look at opportunities to see how we benchmark against our peer councils, so we can understand how to drive better public sector value for money and improve our performance on behalf of residents. Overview and scrutiny asked a number of detailed questions about individual performance measures, and I hope that we've managed to come back and give you the detail that you asked at that meeting. And I'm not going to discuss those here tonight, because otherwise we end up having to have a procession of portfolio holders to come and assist with some of the detail. Cabinet considered the paper and the comments made by overview and scrutiny and endorsed the recommended changes. So tonight, Council, I seek your approval for the revised corporate plan 2024 to 25.
Thank you very much. So we have a recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Wakeford, thank you. Before we take that to vote, I will now open it up for debate. Do we have any questions or comments?
take my seat while we go to
Councillor Gray.
Well, it would be remiss of me not to engage in some form of debate on a corporate plan. I think everyone seems to be sitting on their hands. I don't know whether everyone's keen to get off to Easter holidays or not. So, yeah, I mean, my reflections on this, obviously it's been through scrutiny, and thank the scrutiny panels and those members around there for getting involved in it. I mean, as I said last year, lot to like. Not much there that one can fundamentally disagree with, but perhaps some reflections from me. And I don't want a procession of cabinet people standing up talking about things, so I'm not going to go into detail or afford them the need to stand up and do that. I think, and I'm sure I'm looking here at the correct statistician here, getting these targets right is right. That's the right thing to do. That's the important thing to do. And too often the targets have kind of drifted in the second quarter, by which time we've already sort of well underway through the course of the year. And I think something to reflect on here is how can we bring this perhaps more embedded into the process, and how do we reflect on the outcomes when we get here in a year's time. Because when I was looking at the reflections, what we said we would do and what we did, some of those, I understand why you want to include some of those things in there, but they're a little bit disconnected from the bread and butter, I think, of what we were trying to achieve in there. I also feel that you did allude to it, Executive Leader, not everything went well. Now, you don't get that impression from reading this, so some self-reflection on what have we learned, where are we going, what went well, what didn't go well. I mean, let's be realistic. There's an item in here about CPE. That's like an elastic band. It's not this council's fault, but it's an elastic band that's got stretched out over a period of time. So let's just acknowledge that. When it comes to workforce reform, we can say all sorts of nice things, but the reality was that we had a major confrontation with elements of our workforce last year, and we need to acknowledge that and reflect on that. Now, you may feel that you have done that in private, but again, I think a real plan would say, what's the root causes behind here, and how are we going to bring that forward? I caution us against 64 items because I just don't think we've got the bandwidth as an authority to tackle all 64 items that sit here. Now, I know that they're not all items in and of themselves, but there's a big programme of work. We have an ambitious joint administration. I'm sure we have, I know we have an ambitious chief executive. We have very dedicated staff in here. But this is where I would probably pull this back in terms of the focus as I see it, and as I think a number of my colleagues would see it, is that there's a lot of initiatives in here. But actually, at the end of the day, people want councils to do basic stuff well. And I think there's a lot of stuff happening in and around Huntingdonshire, some of which we are not responsible for, but some of it we are responsible for, that we could do better. So when I think about improving the quality of life of people in Huntingdonshire, yes, it's important that we stop people going into crisis. Yes, it's important to help people who are coming out of a crisis. And I can't remember what the third one or the first one that was on there was. Improving the happiness and well-being of residents. Build a smart objective around that. I'm sure you will be able to do so. But what I worry about is that I think actually a lot of our residents are saying things like, for example, my streets are dirty, my gutters are not getting cleaned out, my drains are therefore getting blocked, admittedly somebody else's problem. If you live in a town centre, it's absolutely fine. We come around and do an excellent job at maintaining the street scene. If you live in the countryside, there's litter everywhere. And that litter is our responsibility as a litter authority. And people look at the condition of their neighbourhood and draw reflection from that. And I think ultimately people are saying it's great to have these initiatives, but we want you to do the basics well. They're frustrated about grass cutting and perceived lack of grass cutting, the quality of grass cutting. They're frustrated about bins, bin collections, and the green bin tax that's coming in on Monday or whenever it is coming in. These are things that people are really worried about. And it's important, I think, to focus that doing the basics is what people expect of us. And I acknowledge this is all really good stuff, but I do think some reflection around that, particularly around pride of place, particularly around that, because I think, again, whether we like it or not, we should acknowledge that by and large there's a big difference between the rural side of this chamber and the urban side of that chamber. And the urban side of this chamber is doing reasonably well out of the joint administration here, the joint administration at County Hall, the joint and the mayor doing whatever he's doing wherever he is. Many of the residents that we represent feel that they're paying more tax for worse services. And ultimately, I think we need to reflect on that as we go through here. So lots of things to like. We wish you the very best in doing it. We know that you have staff who are up for it and new staff that are coming in at the end of it. Importantly, will be making sure that we measure and put in good stretch targets to take it forward. So with that, I suspect I've used up my time. Thank you for bearing with me.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd agree with almost all of that. I completely agree with the importance of setting targets and measuring ourselves against those targets. Of course, all targets are arbitrary. And, you know, we've all noted that when we go to ONS and report, I present the corporate performance report, it gets tedious if all the marks are green. So if things go wrong with this council, you know, I want us to identify them using statistics and be able to take action together to solve them as well. So I'm completely happy to do that and to work with the whole chamber in setting realistic and appropriate and wherever possible stretch targets for the council. I'm very aware of the phrase, though, that don't let perfect be the enemy of good. So I don't think we're trying to claim that we've been perfect at all. There's been definite struggles. I know we have conversations with the leader regularly. It's been quite a lot of stress of 2 years of administration, but I think we're doing quite good. I just wanted to address the point. It's a bit of a weak point for me, but drains. I will point out, that Cambridgeshire County Council, in St Neots alone, I have the statistics for the entire council, at the entire county, cleaned 6,099 drains in 2023 alone, and cleaned about 5,000 to 6,000 drains in St Neots and more across the whole district. In the 5 years before I was elected to County Council, the Conservative administration at County Council cleaned 0 drains in 5 years, at least in St Neots and Manchester, because we have FOI requests to show that. So, you know, we're trying to make improvements. We've been through several severe flooding incidences recently. We've been lucky, but we haven't had the same sort of flooding we had in years before. So, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I completely agree with you, and we will always work together to push our performance using scientific methods. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to remark on Councillor Gray's comments to do with litter, and I think our officers and our street cleaning team do very well on the budget that they have. And what I would like to say is that with the green bin subscription, a non-statutory service, this will allow us to give our teams more budget on statutory duties.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, sorry, just as you did mention me there, if I might just come back on that. I was not criticising the staff and I wasn't criticising the town centres. I'm talking about roadside litter across our district, for which we have responsibility. I have tried in the previous administration, not, I might add, terribly successfully, to get more investment into sorting that out. I don't believe that, I'm afraid, your green bin money is going into dealing with what I'm talking about, because I don't see anything in the budget that addresses issues of roadside litter. Drive through this district, outside of the towns, there's litter everywhere. And it speaks, just like my teenager's bedroom, and frankly, other people's care and attention to the way that they run their lives, it speaks to the place that we live in, which is, in places, let's be honest, a complete tip. And I think you should reflect on this in terms of take that away. It's great that it's nice and tidy in St Neots Town Centre. It's great it's tidy in Huntingdon Town Centre. But my point was about the rest of the district.
Councillor Wakeford, then Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you. I know what my 5-year-old's bedroom looks like. Don't tell me they get worse when they become teenagers, Councillor Gray. Well, yeah, I'll think one year at a time. I want to thank colleagues for remarks on the corporate plan, and I am going to agree in particular with Councillor Ferguson when he thanked Councillor Gray for saying an awful lot of what we agree with, and I think Councillor Gray's contribution was largely magnanimous. There was, clearly reference to a narrative that we appreciate is suggested that somehow, as an administration, that we're interested in urban areas and not rural areas. Appreciate it suits some people to suggest that narrative is true, but we do challenge it robustly. And I think the Councillor Hodgson-Jones referenced in his thought for the day the importance of not just doing the easy things, and I think that's absolutely right and fair challenge. The easy things for us would be focusing on what we call the doing in the terminology in the corporate plan, the purely focusing on the basic things that we control completely ourselves. What I think was right about the change of direction that we introduced in the corporate plan last year, which we have iteratively updated this year, is the focus on enabling other work outside what we control and influencing bodies that we don't have direct control over, because they impact some of the bigger challenges that face our residents' lives that we'd just not be engaging with if we focused on only what we controlled, which includes, in terms of work, I and colleagues along the table have been working on over recent months around, for example, the challenges of rural transport and what public transport means in a largely rural area as well. So I think there is a focus on some of these more intractable challenges that are particularly true in the more rural parts of our area as well in our corporate plan. So I am pleased with that. I think the minor amendments we've got this year to it are entirely sensible and do make it more likely we can remember all of our corporate priorities in the same breath. So with that, I'll sit down. Thank you, colleagues.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to some of Councillor Gray's comments about our staff and our relationship with our staff and the need to reflect on the relationship over the last year. And I would say that the pay agreement that we've reached in the last month demonstrates to me just how much reflection work we have done and how we have aimed to improve that relationship. In the corporate plan document, we describe our aim to be the employer of choice and to improve both recruitment and retention. And I know from speaking to staff in the last week since that pay agreement has been reached, that literally has been the case. That pay agreement has encouraged people not to leave our organization, and they believe it's attracting others to come and work for us. So I think we've spent the last year doing a lot of backwards looking towards our relationship that existed in the past, not just over the last year, but over the last 10 years, and how our staff have been treated, how they've been paid, if they've received pay increases or not. And I think we've achieved a really positive relationship with staff now that we can be proud of.
Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find it quite amusing that in his remarks, Councillor Gray commented that his speech was going to trigger a succession of portfolio holders, and lo and behold, that's precisely what we got. But I'm not going to criticise the portfolio holders. I'm just going to pick up on something that Councillor Ferguson said, because it's something that is dear to my heart. And it's to do with not just the setting of targets and deciding on what targets to set, but on how we challenge ourselves and how we challenge our council. And it's an area where the scrutiny committees really should be doing far more than they currently do in terms of the way that the council looks at itself, the way that the council looks at its targets. And my challenge to the scrutiny committees is scrutinise yourselves and see what you can do to help to deliver more meaningful targets and support the administration in achieving those targets, because it's not in anybody's interests that we spend our time in committees either not spending time because we've got poor agendas and haven't anything to say, or we spend that time in political arguments that don't actually move the council forward. We have, on this side, have been a responsible opposition to hold the administration to account. But that is the role of the scrutiny committees. And if the scrutiny committees aren't doing that job properly, then perhaps we need to scrutinise how scrutiny works in this council. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. In a similar vein to what I kind of did last year, on a slightly different kind of note to previous speeches, I wanted to highlight some of the successes over the past year that I would say are more relevant to young people in the district, because of some of the conversations I do have with young people are quite rightfully, why is what this council does matter to them? And there's some stuff that's kind of jumping out to me in this report. So in 9 months last year, the district saw 544 new affordable homes, which is a terrific number and gives more people like myself the hope that we could own our own home where we grew up. We have the highest number of people attending One Leisure with a new junior membership that's just been implemented. We have a new tenancy strategy and a revised housing strategy on the housing point. And on mentioning kind of encouraging the best people we want to come work for this council, I know there's been a big push to kind of to bring graduate and apprentice staff onto the council, which as a former apprentice, not of this council, but of elsewhere, that means a lot to me. So I just want to highlight that if there are any young people watching, that what actually happens here does matter to you. And yeah, it's a positive outlook for the future.
Thank you. Any further comments? No. Okay, so we have the recommendation and a seconder. I will now call for a vote by show of hands. So all those in favour to adopt the plan, please raise your hand. And anyone against? And do we have anyone abstaining? No. Yep. That's great. Thank you very much. Item 7, the amended fees and charges schedule. This will be presented by Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources, Brett Mickleborough.
Good evening, everyone. The fees and charges schedule was presented to Council in February as an annex to the annual budget and MTFS papers. A check of the annex post-Council approval identified that some fees and charges had been omitted from the submission. The charges that were omitted are those statutory services set by central government. For example, zoo and bingo hall licence fees. Those in error are highlighted green in this evening's pack. The error does not impact the numbers within the core budget or the MTFS. This omission was caused by human error. I've been asked how we might eliminate human error in the future. The only possible way to guarantee the omission of Human error is to eliminate the humans. However, I, for one, am not ready to embrace our AI overlords. It is also important to note that during our checking process that was staffed by humans, the error was caught, and the error was caught before final publication, and therefore a tweak to the procedure rather than wholesale changes should be enough to prevent this occurring again. Overview and scrutiny have reviewed the amendments and are satisfied. I'll pass back to the Chair for any questions and to complete the approval process.
Thank you. So we have the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wakeford. And do we have any comments from anybody? Councillor Gray?
Well, I'm glad that we're not eliminating the humans. And thank you for your honesty and candour. And, we all saw the budget paper and the work last time round, and these things happen, and no criticism from me about that at all. It is unfortunate for you though, because normally the fees and charges schedule just kind of gets whooshed underneath the door and gets zero mention whatsoever in full council, because everyone's busy talking about the MTFS and council tax and big strategic things like that, and focusing on some of this is a little bit more mundane. There's a reasonable amount of inflationary increase, and given where inflation is, I would say that many of our residents will feel it's well above inflation. Things for leisure charges in there, 8%, 7%. That's pretty rich in the circumstances we find ourselves. I was also thinking it's a little ironic that we've been busy saying how much we want to support housing and tenancies and making housing affordable for people, and yet for houses of multiple occupation is another 10% increase, another increase in 10% on a change to the fees last year that's going through there. And I'm not a landlord, but if I was a landlord, where do I think that 10% is going to go? It's not going to be coming out of their pocket. It's going to travel straight through to tenants. So I would just urge you to, as you look at these in the year ahead, just bear some of those unintended consequences and some of those inflationary elements in mind. Clearly, there's one massive elephant in here, and at the risk of being rather boring and talking about green bin tax yet again, it appears in here. So I will not be supporting this particular schedule of fees and charges.
Any other comments? No? Okay, so we have the recommendation and a seconder. So the council is recommended to approve the highlighted amendments to fees and charges schedule Annex A of the 24-25 budget and medium-term financial strategy 25-26 to 28-29. Can I have a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And those against? And do we have anyone abstaining? Sorry, was that a bit quick? Yep, that's carried. Thank you.
You're looking for an extension behind Brett.
I wasn't sure. Councillor Courtney didn't raise his hand. That's what I asked.
Right.
I wasn't sure. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Item 8, questions to members of the Cabinet. So we're moving on to where councillors can ask questions to members of the Cabinet. Just as a reminder to everybody that all questions must be relevant to matters for which the council has powers or duties, must not relate to any item which is included elsewhere on the agenda this evening, since they can be raised at that point of the meeting, should be limited to obtaining information or pressing for action, and must not divulge or require to be divulged confidential or exempt information, and also must not exceed 2 minutes in duration. I would also like to remind you that if you would like to take the opportunity to ask supplementary questions, please do so by raising your hand and acknowledging to myself and not directly to the Executive Councillor. Do we have any questions? Councillor Corley.
I'm not usually first up. Thank you, Chair. My question is for Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor, I've been recently attending meetings of parish councils in my ward, and had the privilege of attending a meeting last week in Kimbolton where we were discussing the possible closure of the fire station there. What became apparent from many of the representatives of the parish councils there was a concern over their paying out all this money in council tax, and they seem to be getting less and less of it. And in particular, they were getting very aerated about the green bin tax. The issue has arisen around fly tipping. Now, we recognise that we can address fly tipping when it's on public land, but I have a lot of private landowners in my ward who are particularly concerned about the potential increase of fly tipping. So can you assure us that we will do all we can to enforce fly tipping when it's reported, but also help the parish councils? And am I addressing this to the wrong person? I get a sense I am. I'm terribly sorry. Councillor Ferguson, then I'm sure you're going to pick this up. Can you assure us that we have robust plans in place for tackling fly tipping? Because I know my residents will be very concerned about that. But what can we do to encourage and educate people around fly tipping? Certainly as the green bin tax takes effect next week, and I'm not sure how much uptake we've had, but I suspect the potential for fly tipping will increase significantly.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. So it is my area of cabinet responsibility because enforcement is part of my area of responsibility. Last month, I spent a very illuminating day out with Ashley, who is in charge of our enforcement team, touring the north of district from Ramsey through to Yaxley and investigating various forms of fly tipping. And this whole thing about the district council doesn't enforce fly tipping on private land is urban myth and not true. So we investigated several occurrences of quite industrial level fly tipping on private land, and the enforcement team take that very seriously. Recently, we passed a new schedule for enforcement where we've increased the fine significantly, and I agree with you completely. It's about education. Most of the fly tipping comes from commercial operators, illegal, and quite often it's residents who entrust a commercial operator, sorry, Chair, for you, to take their waste away, and that commercial operator ends up dumping it somewhere. And in fact, what happens, if we can catch them, both parties get prosecuted. So we significantly increased the fines. I think the most valuable thing we can do, and I think the comms team do a good job of this anyway, but when we prosecute people, and we do try and prosecute people, we make sure that the press are aware to set an example of these people as well. So I agree it's an issue. I think that there's part of the problem is that our ops team are quite enthusiastic to clean up fly tipping, but the enforcement team would like to investigate every single incidence of fly tipping if they can get there first and it's not turned up. So any instances we know, make sure that the enforcement team know, because I think it's a real problem, but it's one which we take very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, do you want to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson, for answering that. One part of your question, if you are interested, you did say that you were not sure of the uptake of the green bins, and I do have that figure here if you wish, if that's okay, Chair, through you, Chair. We have got 42% total households taking up the garden green bin, and the target was 30. 51% of eligible households. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Goldson.
Thank you, Chair. Again, my question is to Councillor Taylor, who have previously shared the questions earlier this week. Green bin freighters. Notices re the freighters' locations, times, dates has been sent to the parish council, who have passed it out to all and sundry within their local areas to reach the wider audience. This has caused a storm of protest being directed at the parish council, saying, why wasn't this not broadcast before people paid the £50 or £57? Will you be safeguarding against businesses using the freighters? Have you thought about the possibility of people dumping bags before or after the 6:30 to 1 o'clock? Or will this be down to our fly tipping team to clear up? Can you help PCs with response to these questions as they're picking up every day all of these questions? I know my parish clerk has been directing it to the HDC site Facebook page to see. One of the things that has been put on that I thought was very useful was the use of the What 3 Word app to try and locate where these were. However, one is in a Scout building, in a Scout compound in Yaxley. One is in the reception centre of the Burgess Hall. One is in the centre of a park, 250 metres away from any tarmacked area. And that's just a few that I've looked at, but a lot more I've seen. The What 3 Words is a fantastic app. I would like to see what you're going to do, and can we get these amended and disseminated to the PCs for accuracy, please?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. Yes, we thank you for the email about another concern, and we spoke twice on the phone. I would like to address the fact that I'm finding it very worrying that our residents do not know about this, the initiatives, the community initiatives. We have been very clear throughout scrutiny process of our intentions on the community initiatives, co-produced with members, towns and parish councils and the community groups at workshops. And at the workshops where the proposals were discussed at great lengths, we had evening sessions and weekend sessions to accommodate people within our community. The reason we've taken out these community initiatives because it addresses the concerns around people being excluded, who, as we all know, members are very concerned about, who cannot afford a bin. So this is the reason we've taken out these community initiatives. The What's 3 Words, the officers are going out and assessing the sites at the moment, and they will bring back any concerns. And I have already spoken to officers about the What's 3 Words, and they understand what's going on and they are assessing the whole situation. I don't know if Councillor Ferguson wants to pick up the fly tipping element of it, but to be quite honest, he's just spoken about that, and we will encourage our residents to report it on the website.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. My question is to the Executive Councillor for Jobs, Economy and Housing. Please can the Executive Councillor give an update on the uptake and progress of the Shopfront Improvement Grant Scheme in Huntingdon, Ramsey, St Ives and St Neots?
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Well, I have, as you may have spotted, should you be diligently reading your papers early for a meeting. I don't think you even sit on the overview and scrutiny panel for performance and growth next week. But thanks for signposting, because as part of a number of pieces of work that are not exclusively focused on St Neots in the Market Towns programme, we do have the Shopfront Grant Scheme ongoing, available to independent businesses now in all 4 of our market towns in the centres of them. There is a table in the report which I've just scrolled down to, which does have almost completely up-to-date figures on the position with the Shopfront grants. It reflects Huntingdon and St Ives being tied with 11 applications from independent businesses in each town, of which coincidentally 8 have been awarded for both of them. Those are the two, of course, where applications have been open longest. St Ives is currently winning in terms of completions, so making use of the funding up to 6, just the 2 so far in Huntingdon. St Neots is reported as having had 9 applications in the short time since it was launched. I'm pleased to say, since the report was published, that has hit 2 digits. We have now had 10. Ramsey is a slower start, but perhaps slow and steady. That's now into plural numbers. That's on 2. It's shown as 1 in the report. We haven't been able to make any awards as yet, given the recent times St Neots and Ramsey businesses have had to apply. But all in, I think we're really pleased with the level of interest and take up in the programme. So thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. My question is for Councillor Sanderson as the portfolio holder for planning. I was wondering if you have any up-to-date information on the current backlog of planning applications and also enforcement cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaw, for your question. And just to reflect on what we discussed earlier regarding the corporate plan, there's some amendments there where we'll be revising our measure of the planning backlog. So that will count minor planning applications without a current extension of time if they exceed 16 weeks rather than the 26 weeks. That's in line with changes to planning guidance. So for February, household applications determined on time remain above our target of 85%. The major applications have fallen slightly, but they're now improving and getting back towards our target. The backlog of over 26 weeks, that's down to 78. For 16 weeks, that's now down to 110. In terms of planning enforcement, we have 27 new cases. We closed 60 of those. We still have 562 open cases, including the legacy ones. That's a reduction of 58 since January, and we've had 9 consecutive months where performance has been met or exceeded by the team. I'm happy to provide those stats further to members if they're interested. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. My question is also for Councillor Taylor, I'm afraid. It's not about green bins, though. So I have been contacted by a constituent who is part of the St Neots Swans Swimming Club. Now, I understand that One Leisure in St Neots has provided the club with 2 sessions of swimming a week, one on a Tuesday and one on a Friday evening, which total 2.5 hours a week, which means that they actually have to travel to Bedford and Huntingdon to complete their training. Now, I further understand that One Leisure in Huntingdon gives 13 hours training session to their local swim group a week, and One Leisure St Ives gives 18 hours to theirs. So given particularly, I should think that you have a good knowledge of One Leisure St Neots being in your own patch, does the Executive Council agree with me that providing access for swimming clubs to teach children to swim is a good thing? What does she think or why does she think there is a discrepancy between how One Leisure in St Neots treats their local swimming club to those in Huntingdon and St Ives? And what does she think she will be able to do, given that she'll have that local interest as their council also?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I have already been approached by Swans and I have read the email, so thank you very much for bringing it to full council. I have spoken to Head of Leisure and Business Operations Manager. We've had a very brief conversation, but we need to look at this in finer detail. We have suggested that we may have to look at some type of swimming strategy. What we do need to do, though, is make sure that we have this balance right, because this is a public swimming pool. So we also have to make sure that general swims for our public also get the look. What we have is a shortage of swimming pools. If our swimming pool was a 6-lane, we could offer more. Unfortunately, it's 4-lane. we've had our needs assessment done on, it's gone through overview and scrutiny, and it has flagged that we have a shortage of swimming lanes in the district. We will continue to look at this, and I absolutely think that teaching for people, young children, to swim is the right thing to do. We in One Leisure have our own swim schools throughout the whole of the One Leisure sites. So absolutely, I do think it's something that we should encourage, but it is weighing up that balance because it is a public swimming pool. But I will continue to look at this with Head of Leisure.
Thank you, Chair. My question's also for Councillor Taylor, I'm afraid. I've had residents ask me how to take their garden waste for Saturday freighters, as I assume that black bin bags won't be acceptable.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I would suggest that, yes, you can use black bin bags if you wish, but I would suggest that something that's more reusable, something more solid, like a crate, would be more appropriate. Whatever you've got handy in the house, you don't need to go out and buy something new. And if you do use a black bin bag, I would suggest taking it back and reusing it.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. And again, my question's for Councillor Taylor. I think from the answer that you gave to Councillor Golson, I think it would be quite handy for the council to scrutinise the council's comm strategy, especially on very important decisions like the green bin tax, because my councils and my residents are saying exactly the same things. They weren't aware about the freighters, and they weren't aware about the extra bins the free bins that councils will be provided with. As much as we have tried to send out the message, it isn't being received. So some kind of scrutiny, I think, would be wise. At the Woodwalton Parish Council meeting last week, a number of questions were raised about the green bin service, and an email was sent to the District Council, but unfortunately no reply has been received as of yet. So my first plea is, can you try and find the email and get a response to them as soon as possible, because there's some very important questions on there. But one of their biggest concerns was about the parish council not owning any land, so they've got nowhere to hold or to place the bins. So how is the district council planning on supporting and helping those councils that don't own any land and have got nowhere to hold or store the bins themselves?
Thank you, Chair. I can certainly answer that first part of your question. I don't think I've even got time to do it, but I have in front of me 2 pages worth of communication to towns and parish councils, community groups. And as I said, this started off in September 2023, the engagement with towns and parish councils to discuss which community initiatives would be most valued and support most in need residents who may not have funds to pay for an annual payment. It goes on to November. All the way through November. I can list it all. I don't think I've got time to do this. We soft launched, raised awareness before residents could subscribe. There are towns and parish councillors. There was handbooks sent to chairs and clerks detailing the community initiatives that were discussed and agreed through the engagement sessions. Full details of all initiatives set out, and councils encouraged to promote these to residents. This was your councils that were encouraged to do this. December 12th, 13, Cabinet and full council set out current subscription detailing in full community initiatives. I can go on. We had posters informing residents the change in services, directing them to web pages, including the details of how to sign up and the community initiatives. Posters displayed on leisure centres, libraries, countryside parks, bin lorry banners, and the sign-up of communication was from the 5th of December. Communication continued through January, February and March, and we're coming to the end of it, and we're starting our new subscription and the new initiatives. I probably got around at least 40 communications with towns and parishes and our communities via websites, etc. The last part of your question, I will reply if that's acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor... yeah, you can respond.
To Chair, because my portfolio area is comms, and I want to reflect on the fact that we have an extremely small comms team, which at full strength is only 2 people. Michael was here today. I think he does an excellent job in communicating. I think this has been probably the most communicated decision that this council has ever taken. I personally have answered thousands of messages on Facebook. I've replied to emails, and I've also been to parish councillors. And as a district councillor and a county councillor, it's my responsibility to go to parish councils and report the decisions of this council, whether I agree with them or not, and the consequence of those decisions as well. At the ONS calling meeting, I made the offer to visit any parish council, in addition to the 8 I have on my own patch, and talk to them about this. Yaxley Parish Council kindly invited me up, and Councillor Goulston was there, and I went to talk to Yaxley Parish Council about the decision, and that offer is still open. But as councillors, if our parish councillors are unaware, we have to take that responsibility on ourselves. It's a responsibility I take seriously, and I hope that you do too, Councillor Gray, through you, Chair. But not Councillor Gray.
Councillor Martin, did you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a supplementary question. Thank you for the replies, and I don't doubt that there hasn't been a lot of information that's been out there, including from ourselves. But obviously the message isn't hitting home, and that's the issue. And I work in digital comms. That's part of my role on a day-to-day basis. Maybe there's a different way of doing it, so it does hit home. That's what I was talking about. That's where the scrutiny comes in. That's what I was talking about. But I do find it disappointing that the most important question is the one you're going to come back to me on writing. But you spoke more about the scrutiny part and not the important question that my parish council has. Now, the second question that I have for you, and it comes from them, is what happens if there's contamination in those shared bins? Is it the parish council's responsibility to look after that? Is a district council going to take some kind of ownership over that? Because I don't think parish councils or parish councillors are going to want to go bin diving to try and dig out certain, especially like Wood Walton has their clerk for 1 day a week. So it's not going to be, they're not going to be able to control it as much as someone like Sawtry that's got someone on full time. So that's one of the other questions. What happens if there's contamination? Whose responsibility is it? But again, whilst I've got time, I do find it disappointing that you spent the whole of your 2 minutes talking about the comm strategy when I only asked for it to be reviewed in scrutiny and not the important question that my council had.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. It might be because I don't know the answer, so that's why I will come back to you with that, if that's acceptable. Yes, it will be the town's, it will be the parish's responsibility to look at a contamination. It will be their responsibility to make sure the bins are there ready for collection as well.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't sure whether you'd missed me, actually, at the back here. Just before my 2 minutes start, I'm hoping you're going to reset it. I might just say it wasn't a fashion statement or a hair transplant, unfortunately. But we can but hope. Anyway, if the 2 minutes can start again, that would be nice. My questions to the portfolio planning, I do have 2 questions. One's for the portfolio planning, and it really follows on the previous one. It's about the price increases, which we know a lot of them were government-sourced price increases, of actually on an average of 35% for fees and applications and other charges in the planning department. I say average. And we have mentioned it's going to hit some people harder than others. So can the portfolio holder assure our residents and developers that they will see the much improved turnaround in applications, which will result in improved housing numbers, affordable housing, which we've heard a bit about before, and perhaps more than a couple of items, which seems to be an average at the moment over the last 2 years on DMC each month. Can you also assure me that the increase in income for planning will be ring-fenced for planning and hopefully improve conservation enforcement areas, as these areas seem to fill up my inbox and I think plenty of others for the future? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, can I say how glad I am to see Councillor Niche back in the chamber. I did detect you sneaking in the back there, and I was waiting for this moment. So no, it is seriously very good to see you back. So thank you for your question. I think on fees and charges, yes, we're going through many challenges with the planning service, as we often do. It's high demand. We do get our inboxes filled with things like conservation issues. What I will do is I'll get back to you in writing on the specific questions that you put. Just on the DMC business, yes, I agree it's unfortunate that there have been low numbers going to DMC, but the backlog is actually reducing, and that's part of the reason why. Applications are being determined in accordance with the council's key performance indicators. We're agreeing actually, or parishes are agreeing with us, shall we say. So we're seeing fewer of those disputed applications coming to the panel. I certainly will come back to you in more detail on this. In fact, in terms of income, though, I'm pleased to report that we did get a grant from the Department of Levelling Up, Michael Gove's department, which our head of planning obtained. So that actually has boosted our income, and I'll ensure that's invested back into the service as much as possible. Thank you.
Did you want to come back?
No, thank you, Chair. I did have the second question for somebody else, if you wanted me to take that one now.
That's fine.
Thank you. I'm afraid it is actually on the green bins. And it's a slightly different tack because it's a question I've got, actually. I was contacted by a 90-year-old single, it was a widow, actually, after a gardener had advised her of the green bin tax. Now, the reason I'm pointing that out is that the lady concerned was not aware, and I know we talked about communications, being 90-year-old, she's not on Facebook, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, and she's also housebound, and she has assisted bin collections, so therefore even the hangers, she didn't get the hangers at all. I updated her and told her what it was all about, and I said I'd look at and ask whether she is required to pay. The reason I've asked that is because she's on reduced council tax payments anyway, and on attendance allowance for her care. I did write to her through the system on customer services. I did get an email back fairly promptly, but I hadn't realised it because it went through from mail as opposed to that. So I asked again, and I got another response through which said, "Thank you for your email regarding the new bin green service." Although she did say, "Well, why is it new? I've always had this." Unfortunately, there are no concessions to this charge. And so if you'd like to continue having your garden waste collected after the 1st of April, you need to subscribe. Now, to her, that's nearly a 200% tax increase. So it doesn't really go to being to the caring of the vulnerable in this area. Now, everything I've looked at doesn't even tell you that there is any other way around it. So my question really is this correct, that there is all these people out there who sometimes can look out their house and can only look out their house and see a garden, are actually going to have to pay the £57 for their green bin tax now? And just as an addendum to that, because I didn't mention her about the freighters, but I'm sure she would have, 3 words for the administration if she was asked to take it to a freighter.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you are correct. There isn't much more I can say on that. There is no benefit system within the green bin tax, as you would like to call it. There's not much more I can say. I mean, we have put out the community initiatives. We are hoping that neighbours can help. But there is one point that I would like to pick up on, which you have got me thinking in regards of communication to people that may be housebound, and we have put the hangers, as you say, on the bin. That this is something that I will pick up with officers, because I think you've hit a good point that anything with assisted collection, if it isn't happening now, if we have bin hangers, those hangers need to go through the door. So I do appreciate you saying that, and I will pick that up with officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mickleborough. Sorry, did you want to?
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to quickly come back and say it's probably a bit late for that, and also I do think it's very disappointing that you've got infirm elderly people who haven't had to pay tax or pay limited tax and now going to have to pay,
an awful lot of money which they've got to try and find from somewhere, who are on meagre pensions, some of them, so not very caring. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. What I'm suggesting is going forward, we use bin hangers pretty much all the time for Christmas date changes and anything else that changes within the service. So I think if we're not doing it already, bin hangers for assisted collection should be going through doors.
Councillor Mickleborough.
I have a question for the portfolio holder of employment. I was pleased to read about the recent pay settlement for our staff. I'm interested in the affordability of the recently agreed payment, as well as how it will impact staff recruitment for the year ahead, and whether such a prompt settlement will influence the ongoing staffing strategy.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mickleborough, I think that all of us should be very proud of the staff that work for our council. Especially in the last 2 years, we have asked them to make lots of changes, and we've asked them to work in new ways and have new priorities. And they have certainly risen to that challenge, and they deserve to be paid fairly for their good work. And so I hope that the speed with which we've reached our pay agreement this year shows a maturing of our relationship with our council staff, as I mentioned before, after Councillor Gray's remarks. It's true that benchmarks like the real living wage are increasing at speed, and it's always going to be a struggle to achieve the very highest standards for our staff in an organisation that receives less and less government funding every year. So yes, Councillor Mickleborough, it is affordable, and within the budget that was approved by this council last month, combined with the formation of our workforce strategy, we can have productive and respectful negotiations with our staff. We can recognise their hard work and their dedication to the council. As I mentioned earlier tonight, from speaking with staff earlier this week, I know that the pay agreement has already been influential to some employees who were thinking about departing our council. And staff reps also tell me that they think it will boost the attractiveness of our council to other staff. So Huntingdonshire is the first council in Cambridgeshire to reach a pay agreement for the coming year. But really all credit of that attainment is due to Mr. Oliver Morley, our corporate director, who's been working very hard on this, our HR management team, but especially our dedicated staff and Unison reps that have been involved in the process all along the way.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. This question is for portfolio holder for planning. Corporate Governance Committee met last week. We spent quite a lot of time on the risk register. This is a register written by our own officers. And within that written report, we have item 347, development management risk, impaired achievement of commitments. And within that, the cause, council lacks skills and or resources for economic growth in the district. Failure to achieve housing, economic growth and environmental commitments, non-achievement of NNDR growth funding, unmet residential outcomes and a threat of the future prosperity of the district. Quite a damning report from our own officers, Chairman. And I'd like comments from the portfolio holder, if I may.
Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Butler, could you turn your microphone off, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it shows the importance of updating our local plan. I think it shows that some of the weaknesses in the existing plan, because it's quite dated, and as Councillor Butler knows, we're working towards that. I'm not blaming the previous administration for that. It was set a few years ago. I know Councillor Butler is involved in that process and was at the committee chaired by Councillor Davenport-Ray, so I look forward to working with him. There's always room for improvement. As I said earlier when I gave the feedback to Councillor Shaw, we are meeting our targets, but there are times when we haven't met those. We have fallen short and we'll continue to work towards achieving them. it certainly is very difficult to recruit and retain planning staff. They are very good at what they do, but they are few and far between. So it's vital that we ensure that we have a robust workforce strategy in place, and the team that we do have are utilised, which I think they are. Thank you.
Councillor Davenport-Ray, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, as the Cabinet Member for Employment, I wanted to add a little bit to that question. So over the last 3 to 4 months, our strategy for attracting and retaining specifically planning staff has changed. And I hope you might have seen some of that in the media. If not, please do come to the Employment Committee and see some of the things we're going to present in the committees to come. I think we've learned that the market is stagnant and we need to do something different to attract that quality planning staff and bring them to our council. And we've already started to do that, and we're already starting to see some of the results, and many of our vacancies are being filled. So I hope that helps to reassure you on some of those risks. That's sort of the duty of the risk officers, to identify where the risks might be, and we're putting into place the mitigations for those risks.
Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. This is for Councillor Conboy. Last week I attended a really fantastic event by the chair of the business board, Al Kingsley, and it was a Phoenix Futures event aimed at the future of Cambridgeshire, and specifically they involved Huntingdonshire in that, to do with the youth and engagement of the future. Huntingdonshire was brought into that a fair bit in that event. So what I would like is an update on our Futures Place strategy and the Festival of Place. What is to happen with that? Thank you. An update. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tevlin. And I'm really pleased you were able to attend that event. Certainly those who attended tell us that it was a very good event. And it's really nice that the younger members of our community are having an opportunity to take part. In terms of the place strategy, you'll be pleased to know that I'm returning to overview and scrutiny very shortly to bring an update on Festival of Place, and following up from the last meeting and the workshops we held at the overview and scrutiny's request to look at options for what we might develop. So that's coming to next month, and I'm looking forward to overview and scrutiny's feedback, because I'm very much hoping that we will be in a position then to move ahead with the grants that we're hoping to offer. Thank you.
Councillor Orban.
Thank you, Chair. We all know social media is a mixed blessing, so I have to apologise for Councillor Taylor because I was tagged in a post and I didn't have a chance to give her advance warning of this question, which is surprisingly enough about green bins. One of the churches in my ward appealed against the decision that they would have to pay the green bin charge, and my question is, what thoughts did the administration give to giving charity relief for churches and other charities in the district, and what review will there be given to change that in the future?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. This is something we've looked at, and same as with benefits. It is very, very hard to administrate. I would imagine that Councillor Ferguson would be able to say a little bit more on the benefit side and administrating the actual. It's not straightforward to find out who's on benefits, who's charity. It would cost a lot of time, resource in our officers. I don't know if Councillor Ferguson wants to say anything more on that.
I don't have anything more to say on that, other than that we don't have the information in the benefits team. We don't have a big enough Revs and Bens team to do that, and the cost of administrating that would significantly reduce the effectiveness of the scheme. So it's not something. It's something we've talked about extensively and talked about in the call-in. So I'm surprised the same questions keep getting asked again and again and again. Perhaps we could refer the member back to discussions we had last August.
Councillor Orban.
Supplementary. I raised that specifically as I mentioned, Chair, that this was raised with me this evening, and it'd be remiss of me as a local member not to raise that on behalf of my constituents. I can tell Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Taylor that I was at one of my other parish councils this week, and there is a strongly worded letter which has probably been moderated by the church about the about the service that we're going to be providing for villages that don't fit in the Saturday Freighter area. I won't go on to this because I don't want to turn this into a ward surgery. My supplementary question is on something else that came up on social media today. One of the residents in my ward was concerned that having forked out 57.50 for his green bin charge, the green freighter is like to be just at the end of his road, and the idea of refunds that was mentioned, that Councillor Bywater mentioned with Councillor Taylor, as the request for refunds have got to be in on the 1st of April, and this has only just come to light. As long as a resident gets their letter in and it's registered as having been sent to the 1st of April, will their request for a refund still be considered?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Orban. I will have to find, you are totally right. So the only way that they can get a refund is before the service starts. So as from the 1st of April, no refund will be given. That has been stated on our website as well. So basically, because it is Easter, Friday and Monday, the last day is tomorrow if they want a refund. So I will have to find out whether or not it's honoured thereafter once the email's sent. If it's Good Friday, is that what you're trying to say? Because Good Friday isn't a working day for our staff.
Councillor Orban?
Thank you, Chair, for the indulgence. I'm aware I've had my supplementary, but as I was asked a question, I thank Councillor Taylor for that. Yeah, if Councillor Taylor could email all members of the council or an officer to clarify that position. I don't expect there'll be a flood of people asking for refunds, but if members of the public, residents in Huntingdonshire have raised that, I think it's last minute. It is good that we're all clear as to what we're asked as local members and what our officers are being asked and what the response will be.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. This is to Councillor Davenport-Ray. I was just wondering if there's any updates on the replanting of trees along the A14, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have an update from very recently, so I prefer to go away and get a very recent one, and then I'll come back to you in writing.
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you. And I've got another question to the portfolio holder for waste. The mechanical biological treatment plant, is there any possibility of getting a tour of this facility, please? Because I wasn't aware we had one.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, indeed. Myself, well, actually, when I first became portfolio holder for waste, I opened a tour up for all members to go to the Water Beach plant. I wasn't able to make it at that day, but myself and Councillor Taylor behind me, we went on an educational tour, which was really quite fascinating. So absolutely, there is an opportunity.
Councillor Ferguson.
So we were all invited to visit that plant when we were first elected, and I myself, Councillor Martin, Councillor Davenport-Ray and some others visited. And if you have the opportunity, I would highly recommend it. First, for a start, it would correct some misconceptions about what happens to biological waste in the grey bin stream as well. So if you've been, you'll understand. Unfortunately, you won't be able to do that at the moment because the MBT and the IVC lines at Water Beach are closed down temporarily while the County Council investigates upgrading the facility to meet recent European legislation. So we don't know when it's going to be open, but there is a big education centre there, and Andy Rogan would be pleased to take you along. I think it's a very, for me, it was a very revelationary moment, understanding what happens when you put waste in different bins and how it's treated. So I recommend it when it's open, but it's not open now.
Councillor Ferguson, can I just ask, because I don't know what those two lines are. I don't know if anyone else is.
Do you really want me to start? So,
You've got
There
2
are
minutes.
you've
Go.
got 3 bins. Yeah, you have a black bin. Yeah, which ultimately some of that bin will end up in landfill. But what happens is that goes through a separation process in which anything that's recyclable or compostable is taken out by manual and automatic processes, and they leave some biological material so they can rot that waste. So that when the residual goes into landfill, it reduces its volume, and so you have to use less landfill. The blue bin goes to a very similar plant, but is it's called the MRF, which basically separates all the recyclables, and we package those up and resell that. And the green bin goes into a composting IVC. So MBT stands for mechanical biological treatment as well. You won't be allowed inside it, I think, because you have to wear a hazmat suit, but you'll be allowed in the MRF, I think. That's the truth.
Thank you. I'm glad I asked the question. I don't know what happened there. Councillor Patel, I know you've been waiting for ages. It's now your moment.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, but my question is also for Councillor Taylor. You gave a very comprehensive overview of when communications were sent out to the parish councils, etc., regarding the green bin tax. But could you tell me exactly when they were informed that they would be responsible for contamination?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. It is all on the website. So as soon as it went on the website, it is all part of the 10 bin, up to the 10 bin community bin, if the parishes want them. It is all on the website. I can't tell you exactly when that went on the website unless I look through my long list, but I can get you that detail if you wished.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not entirely sure which portfolio holder is responsible for this question, but last week I attended a briefing session on the A141 working party. The invitation came from the portfolio from planning, and there were 4 portfolio holders on the call, Councillor Wakeford, Councillor Conboy and Councillor Davenport-Ray were on it. I don't think Councillor Sanderson was actually on the call. My question is this. This came out of the blue. I didn't know very much about it before this. And it appears that a firm called Atkins have been working for some time investigating how we can alleviate traffic congestion on the A141 and associated routes. And that they had come up with a number of alternative schemes which had been developed over several years. And then the update was to tell us that they were going to bin those schemes and come up with something completely different based around public transport. So my question is, why is it that we have had to wait several years for a scheme to alleviate a serious problem in and around St Ives, and that the council, and I don't know if it's the county council or the mayor or the combined authority mayor or whomever, has now decided that whatever was going to be the solution to provide benefit to our residents is now going to be parked, and we're going to have something completely different that is not going to address traffic congestion, is only going to look at a few minor modifications that will do nothing to reduce the traffic, and yet we have hundreds of homes being built along that roadway. I'm not sure who can answer the question, but I would like to have some guidance as to what I can expect to tell my constituents whilst they're sitting in the traffic on Harrison Way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair. I will pick this up as Huntingdonshire's rep on the Transport and Infrastructure Committee of the Combined Authority. Someone doesn't want to listen. I'm disappointed if Councillor Hodgson-Jones took away from that session that all the work that's been done is being binned, because I don't think that's what we spent 45 minutes explaining. So I think we might look at chasing the presentation, which I don't think has been sent round yet, but I know was promised and is coming. Of course, as the District Council, we aren't leading this work. Combined Authority have commissioned the County Council. The County Council are moving it forward. The reasons why there is a need to look again at some of the proposals is because his colleagues in Westminster have quite rightly updated a number of relevant policies, including the importance of considering things like climate change with an impact on the environment with respect to road building plans. So they are being reviewed to look at public transport improvements and adjustments and how to bring them into line with regulations, I think is my attempt at a few second summary of the session that we had the real subject matter experts leading a briefing on. There will be further engagement around this. I've caught up with Councillor Niche, who's at the back of the room, around ensuring that we've got cross-party membership of the current versions of the working groups, which do predate Councillor Hodgson-Jones' current time on this council. And yes, there is much work still to be done, but we are working on it, and we look forward to further updates.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hodgson-Jones, you want to come back?
Thank you. Well, firstly, yeah, one of the reasons why I wasn't quite sure what the outcome was is because the presentation hasn't been shared, and it was a whistle-stop tour of the presentation. But the serious point I want to make is that if there is a major change to something like this, it's great that you're looking at sustainable transport, but the reality is that if the public transport system is not there, people will travel by car. And in any case, if we had public transport systems, the buses are still going to have exactly the same problem as all the other traffic that is trying to get through one spinal road, which is going to have an awful lot of development alongside it. The number of new houses that have been built along the 1123, which haven't yet been occupied and are therefore not yet spewing their traffic out to congest an already very congested road that connects to the A141. I think that the hybrid scheme that they talked about needs to definitely include something, and that we need to have better understanding of what's going on, and there needs to be more communication from the TIC, which it's an acronym that tells us that it's not actually ticking along properly at all.
Councillor Whitford.
Well, I think that was a follow-up question, if I may, Chair. I quite agree with him on almost all of that, which is precisely why nobody has binned the proposal of looking at road improvements as part of the works, as I sought to explain. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm glad you got a question in earlier. It's very
Thank you very much.
That, very important the Chair has an opportunity to. It's very tempting to direct my question to Councillor Taylor, but I'm going to spare her further agonies this evening and direct my question to the Executive Leader, who might want to reflect on the division of labour amongst her cabinet, because it seems that some people seem to be doing an awful lot of jumping up and down on issues. But mine is about car parking, but not about the technicalities of car parking, but a bigger philosophical question for you, really. Namely, should car parking fees rise to deter people from driving into our town centres, or should they be reduced in order to incentivise people to drive into our town centres and use the facilities in our market towns? And I think well, I've directed my questions to the Executive Leader because I'd like to hear what the Executive Leader, as the leader, feels philosophically is the right direction, or the direction we might expect over the years ahead.
Councillor Conboy.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gray. I'm not sure we've had that philosophical vision for the direction of travel in quite the way you've asked, so I suspect this might be part of an ongoing dialogue over coming months. I think it's a real conundrum, isn't it? Because the answer is we desperately want people to be using our town centres. We'd like them to be accessing them freely. But also all of our high streets, which are not necessarily all urban, some of them are rural. And the real challenge is actually how do people choose to access and what alternatives do they have? And it's a real practical challenge for us, because actually if we had the level of infrastructure that we'd all aspire to, then actually for many people they would have a choice of getting on a bus. In some cases they would go on a bike, but we understand the perils of that. We've heard that very clearly this evening, and John is still with us to remind us around the genuine challenges and concerns that we have over the safety. So I don't think we have an onward view. I think one of our real challenges is not just the philosophy of what should we do, it's also the practicalities of the need to look at our fees and charges. And I'm hoping that as we manage to balance out with that sustainable forward-looking budget, that we might then be able to have that wider philosophical question, because up until now they have been so crucial to balancing a budget. I'm hoping that we will get into a stage where actually we maybe can have that discussion around the philosophy rather than needs must. So can we continue this conversation over a period of time? Because I think it's a really important one. And I think our high streets and our town centres and our rural communities need vibrant places to be able to shop. And our residents expect somewhere to be able to go and shop. So I welcome the question. I don't have an easy answer. I think it's part of an ongoing dialogue, but one I would very much welcome.
And final question, Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair, for remembering me. Story of my life being at the bottom of alphabetical lists, but I know that's not how you take your questioners. My question is for Councillor Taylor, because I don't think we've heard... Because I don't think we've heard enough from her this evening. I remember as a backbench, forgive me, as an opposition councillor in this chamber, hearing then executive members routinely chide opposition members of different parties for not following what were called the usual courtesies of advance notice of questions. I recall being chided, including my councillors in this room as executive councillors, for not giving adequate advance notice, even where I had given advance notice of questions at council. Now, clearly our procedures are as we inherited them as to the lack of need for notice. But I do wonder if Councillor Taylor agrees with me that particularly if there are going to be complex, multi-part, detailed questions with apparent greater interest in some aspects than others, if it might be helpful if we just sought to revisit those courtesies and ensure that there's actually fuller notice to better enable more informed and pithier debate in this chamber. And if she might encourage members to reflect on that as they think about using this section at future meetings.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. I actually didn't know that this was in the procedure, that you could actually ask me a question. Is this fair? Anyway. Okay.
And I didn't give you notice of the question.
Yeah, how dare. No, I generally don't mind being asked on the hoof, but I think you would get a better detailed response from me if you gave me prior warning. This is what we do in county council. It gives us the opportunity to give that really detailed response. I will tell you the truth, I spend about 2 days swatting up on everything of my portfolio just to make sure that I can respond to your questions, not knowing what they will be. I spend a lot of my time trying to get this right for members. It's just the way I am, it's just the way I'm built, that I want to respond to your questions, the same as I want to respond to residents' questions, but really would appreciate advanced warning, a discussion on the telephone, as we did, Councillor Gorson. We had 2 telephone conversations about another matter and then got on to waste. So Entirely up to the individual, but I'm always on the phone. Give me a ring.
Point of order, Chair.
Councillor Orr.
I believe the council constitution doesn't require advance notice of questions. If I could continue without Councillor Ferguson's interruption, I was about to say it is a matter of courtesy, but there are different ways. There are different ways of doing it. Some questions are needed to be on the hoof. Some of them are difficult questions politically, but equally, some of the questions that do require a detailed answer would require a detailed question. The downside of that is we just go through a performance of a written question and a written statement and pre-planted questions, and I don't think that does democracy too much good either. So there's perhaps a balance to be struck.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority update. This standing item provides an opportunity for District Council members to ask questions and comment on the CPCA issues. Please note the decision summaries that were marked to follow on your agendas have been placed on the table for you this evening for those people that require the paper copies. We are also going to slightly shake things up by having people present in a different order. I know, contain the excitement in the room. So Councillor Hassel will present first, which is the activities of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and we will ask for questions after the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So firstly, it's normally a presentation from Councillor Niche and myself, but Councillor Niche is wearing some very stylish headgear that he doesn't want to publicise at this moment. So I'm doing it on my own. But we decided that we'd just change the format because actually you have scrutiny and then you have the board meeting, so it actually makes sense for me to present first, and then Councillor Conboy will come in afterwards and sort of fill in the gaps, so to speak. So I'm going to give you the viewpoint as of overview and scrutiny, but if I could have my first slide, please. Oh, I've got a clicker. Well, yeah. Power, yeah, whoa. So, hey. And it worked as well, so fantastic, yeah. So much of the discussion at the March meeting was around the improvement plan. And I think when we discussed last time I think you were made aware, both from Councillor Conboy and Councillor Niche and myself, that the best value notice had been extended by 6 months. And we were informed at the meeting that the Independent Improvement Board will be sitting for 12 months, and at the moment we've got 6 months of this best value notice. So that raises some challenges to our improvement plan, and John and myself have put them into 3 categories. The first one is strategic alignment, and I think you're probably all quite aware of this because I know Councillor Conboy has referenced this on a number of times, but it's basically the challenge of securing unanimous board agreement on the way forward that satisfies the Department of Levelling Up and Housing Communities, ACCA, DLUC, and other stakeholders. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I think that Councillor Conboy is going to touch on that. Possibly the new thing is point 2, which is delivery confidence. And so I think there was a general, or certainly from an overview and scrutiny perspective, from the impression given to us from officers, is that there was a belief that we'd set clear targets, routes and paths that would lead us to the lifting of this best value notice. So some disappointment that the best value notice was not had not been lifted. Point 2 there of DLUC's expectations. I think the belief is that DLUC was seeing tangible evidence of progress. And at ONS, this question was asked in multiple ways, really, in terms of What specific requirements are there in place from DLUC that is going to tell us that, they're going to lift the best value notice? And it was asked in multiple ways, and I don't think we know the answer to this. And that is actually quite concerning, because we could be in another 6 months' time where we've got another 6 months, and at the moment it appears that we don't quite know what it is that we have to achieve. So, going back to, if you're having an objective which is lift the improvement plan, what does that look like? And then you can set goals and actions in order to achieve that. So that was a problem, and I understand there's a request, and it was approved by ONS, that we would want to get a member of the Independent Improvement Board to come to an OS, and so we could interrogate or scrutinise on what their view of what is needed going forward. So that's it. And the final point on this was the cross-partnership cultural challenges. And I think this, again, possibly Councillor Conboy will raise some points on this particular one as well. But there are clearly some cultural differences impacting the effective collaboration of the combined authority. And that could be because there's an urban-rural split. We have even within Huntingdonshire, we have differences, but it could also be political. And as I reported last time, is that there seem to be some rather cryptic messages coming out, and I think we just need to understand exactly what it means. My view is that, or my challenge is the governance strong enough? So when I talk about governance to wider groups, I don't want to sort of steal Councillor Mickelberg's analogies, but it's rather like a football pitch. Is your governance is your football pitch? So you have your goals, your nets, your referee, the lines, etc., etc. And the idea is that within that pitch you play football. You don't play rugby or tennis or cricket or anything else. And there is this sort of feel that maybe some people are playing rugby when they should be playing football, but I don't know. I also think that I'd like to see a better link between the CPCA and the constituent councils to better guide board members. I think we've had some great debates here. I think to have some wider discussions on some of the CPCA strategy would be very helpful. And that also, to guide our leader, because they're a representative on the board. So I can click. Yeah. So the other thing that we've talked about, and this is very close to the discussion that John and Councillor Nish and myself have had, is the efficiency and effectiveness of the ONS committee itself. This precedes me by a number of years, I think, in terms of the feeling that people have sat on this committee that perhaps hasn't worked as well as it could do. I think the major thing that is an issue, well, just maybe to say one thing before that is, I think there's a view from officers who have guided us that the combined authority overview and scrutiny is in some way different to the district overview and scrutiny that we know and love at HDC. And Councillor Nish and myself have discussed it, and I don't think there are such big differences. I think the major challenge that we have really at the moment, which is this communication between board and ONS, of making certain that messages from overview and scrutiny actually get to the equivalent of cabinet, if you like. And primarily it appears the reason for that is there's literally 2 days before when the overview and scrutiny sits and the board actually sits. And the approach that has been taken is not to extend that time, so there's more time for overview and scrutiny to sit and to make certain that comments and recommendations actually go to the board, which would perhaps be the sensible thing. I think there are logistical issues, but the plan, the approach is to use forward planning. So to look at the strategy, and I actually think this is a great idea, is if you can scrutinise the strategy, then you can make sort of tweaks to the strategy early on, and that makes a difference in the long run. So that makes huge sense. But going back to point one on my previous slide, is that if we can't get strategic agreement at board level, then it makes the overview and scrutiny side of things not work quite so well. So at the moment we have inadequate forward planning. So I think the potentially having overview and scrutiny rather similar to what we have here would be a good way forward, perhaps. Other sort of challenges around agenda management, overloaded agendas, an awful lot goes to overview and scrutiny, so that hinders effective scrutiny. We're currently only getting about 15 minutes per item, which is quite challenging. And we are going to look to prioritise agenda items, so to focus time on where things should, where committee time should be spent. The challenge, as I discussed, of ONS feedback, I've discussed with the chair, and there will be some formal comments on relevant items on future discussions going directly to the board if possible. Another point raised by the chair, which is the staff support, which is not something that I don't think either Councillor Nish or myself are that familiar with, but it's something that I know has been raised by the chair in terms of insufficient staff to support committee work. And I guess from my perspective, and I know that Councillor Nish feels the same way about it, is that scrutiny is a very, very important function. If you take the example that has been discussed tonight around the garden waste subscription service, I spent literally a day of my life in overview and scrutiny of being scrutinised. And I know sort of, Councillor Gledlow and Councillor Kerr, I think you're just coming off therapy now. But it was, although it was difficult if you were on in cabinet at the time and leading the portfolio at that time. But I would say that because of the scrutiny that we got, is that the outcome was considerably better. Cabinet changed position, I changed position, officers changed their position because of the scrutiny that took place. There was so much there. So I would say that it's really, really important that we invest in scrutiny, and having a situation where things aren't scrutinised properly just leads to the kind of behaviour that we see, which is people resorting to going to the media in order to, and then what you get then is inaccurate representations of the issues, and things done in sound bites. So I know that officers from the overview from CPCA do watch this. This is something that I'm very passionate about. It's something that none of us, I don't think, in this forum want the CPCA to be failing in any way. I think we want the best value notice to be lifted, and if there's anything that I can do, and I know Councillor Nish could do, in order to help with that, we are available to talk. So with that, I will pause for questions.
Do we have any questions? Councillor Gray. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just two questions from me. I wonder if you could comment on the irony, and surely there must have been, as an overview and scrutiny panel, some irony that an authority that's under a best value, i.e. are we using public money wisely, notice, increased its precept by 200%. In the space of 13 months, went from £0 to £33 on a Band D item. That can't have gone uncommented on in the scrutiny panel. So I'd be curious as to know what your thinking on that is, or what the report of the panel was on that. And then I was intrigued by your comment that the mayor can't get agreement at the board. Now, my understanding is that the mayor, you're looking as if I may have misunderstood what you had said. That's fine.
You can ask me when I
Well, the impression that's coming through here is that the board is not aligned on your presentation. I'm sure I heard that the board was not aligned.
It's because the microphone's on.
So I'll
ask the question and then we'll come to you for the response.
You'll see what you can make of it. I heard that the board was not aligned. I mean, obviously we'll have to go back and look at the tape later on. But I don't really understand that, because the mayor effectively, he has a number of people who support him on the board, and he is ultimately responsible for leading that board and carrying that board forward. And Councillor Conboy may want to come on this when she gets to her section of it. And I think the real issue that we're looking at here, and I want to know how you're scrutinising this, because all of those press articles that you shared there weren't people putting tweets out there saying, stupid political things. One of them was from the BBC. Maybe that is, I don't know. Cambridgeshire Live was on there. I saw that. That must be good. So I'm curious as to what's going on here, because ultimately the mayor has to lead this. And I think the challenge that's coming through in all of this is that the leadership here isn't strong enough. And I say that because I'm not doubting the mayor's sincerity. I don't doubt that he has very passionate beliefs. I don't doubt that he's not a very nice person. You can be all of those things, but an ineffective leader. And everything I've seen there suggests that that's what we've got.
Councillor Hassel, I think those points are going to be picked up by Councillor Conboy in her presentation. Is there anything you want to?
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up certainly on the first one. I think, in terms of the strategic directions I said at the beginning, which was the point one, it's more in Councillor Conboy's remit, so I'll get her to answer that. Yeah. So to answer the overview and scrutiny piece is that, as I said last time, is that it was raised, very much. So I think I made the point is that we struggle to well, not struggle, but we have a 3% cap. We have a debate here when we are increasing our budget or increasing our budget, and it's a very robust debate, and that seems incongruent with the situation with the board, where the mayor can raise a precept by say 300%, 200%, isn't it? Sorry, without. Needs 2/3 majority of the board to vote against it. Whereas, there are elements. I guess the point I was making, which was you've interpreted things in a slightly different way, is the governance strong in us, which is independent of the mayor. I didn't discuss the mayor, and actually it doesn't relate to the mayor. As I mentioned about the football field, is that the mayor is just one of the players on the football field. This is about the governance of the authority. So the fact that the mayor can put a precept of 200% through, and it can only be defeated by 2/3 majority of the board, isn't the mayor. That's just the rules that the pitch that he's playing on, so to speak. Does that answer your question on that one?
I think in the interest of all of us, thank you.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Thank you very much. Moving on, Councillor Corney will now provide an update on the activities of the Audit and Governance Committee.
I'm not sure whether us moving forward on the agenda, whether that's a promotion. Shall we take that as a promotion?
Take it as a promotion.
You'll be pleased to know I won't be quite so long. I'm a bit loud as well. To be fair, Councillor Hassel, this was obviously said a few of the things I was going to bring up, so I'll sort of pick through my notes. At the last meeting, I'll just give you a couple of the main topics, if you like, where most of the debate was taken. The first one was the auditor's annual report, which I'm sure you can all imagine was really, really interesting. But the biggest part on the biggest topic on that was the increase in its in the costs, and that's purely because of the best value notice. And it's amazing that the implications that's had, because obviously they're doing so much more work to do, which makes sense, but it's something that you probably wouldn't necessarily think about. The improvement framework also continues to be a large part of our time and the meetings we have. We're now into phase 2 of the framework, but equally the Independent Improvement Board having to work on a second plan almost after receiving the extension that we've already heard about from the best value notice, which came back in January. I think they were expecting better news, I think, as we were all expecting and hoping for, but obviously it wasn't to be. So I will sort of go on to a positive note, though, and that we were given an update by the chair of the Independent Improvement Board, which a positive meeting was held with the CA board members and council chief execs as well, which they said from that meeting, a clear vision of I quote actually, a clear vision and ambition emerged for the region. This can be used to promote the investment and the opportunities for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which is obviously what we should be doing as a CPCA anyway. And then finally, I'll go on to the same update. We were told that the relationships and dialogue with DULUC had actually improved, which was obviously a welcome point. They were present at a recent strategic ambitions workshop, and there was a helping hand, a hand out there ready for us to sort of grab onto, really, and that was how it was described to us. Still a long way to go by all accounts, but we're told repeatedly that we are going in the right direction. And I won't bore you and go over too many more things, but I'm sure we'll probably hear a bit more from Sarah.
Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, Steve. Sorry, Councillor Corney, I haven't pre-warned you of this, but just to pick up on some of the comments that you made about the role of the Audit and Governance Committee, but also the comments that Councillor Hassel was making about the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and the comments he made about there being governance issues. Would you agree with me that one way of moving this forward would be for the Audit and Governance Committee and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the board to get together and set up a working group to look at the actual governance structure at the CPCA to see how that can be improved and how the operations of the CPCA and the constitution of the CPCA could be improved, so that we don't spend our time trying to work out how to make those improvements, but can actually proceed to make the improvements in the governance structure and make the improvements in the operation of the CPCA, so that it can actually deliver for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in the way that it was intended.
I think the short answer is yes. And I believe inroads in that are actually happening already. But yeah, certainly, I can't disagree with that.
Any further comments or questions? No. Thank you very much, Councillor Corney. I will now invite Councillor Conboy to present details of the activities of the Combined Authority.
Thank you very much, Chair. I shall try and be brief, but there's a lot to pick up from the questions that have already been asked. So I think I'll start actually with those and then lead into what I was planning to say, because I was planning to make really 2 key points. I think what you've heard is really interesting, because we don't whip around the presentations that come to this council. So, you've heard an honest view back from the Overview and Scrutiny reps, and you've heard an honest view back from the Audit and Governance reps. Some of that might come as a bit of surprise to some of my colleagues at the CPCA. But I will say the governance review that has been done has been extensive over a long period of time. It's in place. I think what we're hearing is the impatience amongst our own team to move fast and get on with it and make it work better. Now, I don't think that means that what we've got is broken. I think actually what we've got is infinitely better than anything we've had before. But there's an impatience. We want to actually get on with doing the job and get on with it as quickly as possible. Certainly the issues that Councillor Hassel has raised, I've shared with the monitoring officer and we've had a response back. So we are feeding that back in so that they are being heard by those who are working on it. And in fact, the lead councillor, Edna Murphy, is also aware of those issues because she leads on that on behalf of the board. So work that's ongoing, but an impatience, a desire to get on, and a desire to actually move the projects forward quicker. Which then leads me into sort of where we are now. If you watch back the last meeting, we've come a long way in 20 months. I've been on that board for 20 months. Previously, interestingly, some of you may not know, I was on audit and governance at the Combined Authority. That's come a long way too, trust me. It definitely didn't look like that 7 years ago. But we've come a long way in 20 months. The organisation has come a long way. We've got officer stability. We've got some very competent, capable officers who are now being supported by permanent staff, also of a very high calibre. That's the first time the organisation is starting to look fully staffed in a very long time. That makes a huge difference to what it can do as a structure. And I certainly wouldn't want those listening tonight to think that any of the impatience and the desire to move forward is a reflection on the commitment and the competence of our officer cohort, because they're doing a sterling job. But what I would reflect is we've come a long way in 20 months in terms of how we work politically. 20 months ago was extremely unpleasant. I won't go into the reasons why. I don't think that's appropriate that we go back and revisit that. But what I would say to you is that how we govern and work as a team is changing. Now, I've been quite outspoken about that. And if you watch back what I said in the meeting when it was a little bit fractious at points, it was polite, but it was a little bit fractious. We're a democracy that's representing our different constituent councils and other bits of our democracy in that board. We're politically different. The areas we represent are different. We've also got business board around the table. We've got police and crime. We've got health. We've got fire. Do we all agree with each other? No. Should we all agree with each other? Not necessarily. Do we have political motivations sometimes about why we might choose to disagree? I'd expect us to. Because actually we're there representing our own organisations with our own interests, and actually, yes, party politics is part of it. Now, I've actually had that conversation with DLUC, not necessarily with all of the officers, but with the officer I spoke to, and I also said it at the Improvement Board. We should be allowed to disagree. That's a fundamental part of how democracy works. How we disagreed 20 months ago is very different from how we disagree now. Now it is polite, it's respectful. It's sometimes a bit sensitive and people are sometimes a little prickly about it, but I'd expect them to be. But it's democracy in action. Do I think it is reasonable for all of those people on the board to unanimously agree on everything? I think that would be highly unusual. And if anything, I would think that would be probably quite concerning, because actually we do disagree from time to time. But there is more unites us now than there ever was. And that comes to my second point, in the sense that we're starting to move forward to agree the things that we can stand behind collectively. And actually the work for UK Reef is a really important driver for that at the moment, because we're going to need to be there in the next month or so selling the Combined Authority. And I talked in that meeting about I want to be able to stand up at Reef, and I want to not only be as passionate about Huntingdonshire, but I want to be able to talk about East Cambs and be really passionate about what they're doing. I want to be passionate about Cambridge City, about Peterborough, about all of our constituent authorities, because actually we need to be able to do that collectively. Do I think they're all as fabulous as Huntingdonshire? Sorry guys, if you're watching, no, we're definitely the best, but I would expect them to say that about their own authorities. They absolutely should, they absolutely must. So my challenge that I've put back to DLUC is, should you expect us to all agree? No, I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. Do we still have work to do in terms of improvement? Absolutely, it's a continuous journey. And even when we think we've done all of this list of things we want to do, there'll be new things. Do I think that we ought to be coming out of that improvement notice? I really hope so. because I actually think we've come a long way in 20 months. I think we're very clear about the direction of travel. I think we have got some things that we are starting to coalesce around. But as some of my colleagues have already said, the clarity about what prevents us is possibly not quite as crystal clear as we'd like. So we're working on that at the moment with the Improvement Board and with DLUC. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I'd like to sort of end on a sort of more positive and optimistic note. I think there is more that's pulling us together than there ever was. I still go on to that meeting, and I said last time, you'll see it on camera, I'm there fundamentally on your behalf to represent Huntingdonshire. But actually, I've got far more to gain on your behalf, on behalf of all of our residents, if we find the things that we can collaborate on, so that actually we get a good benefit out of being part of that arrangement. And if we can secure greater devolution, I think that benefits Huntingdonshire as well as all the other constituent parts. So that's what I'm focused on. I'm determined to be resolutely positive, because if I go into that meeting and I'm negative, I risk not getting for you the sorts of things that you would hope that we're securing for Huntingdonshire. But I'm happy to take any questions. Not expecting lots, but I'm hoping that we've covered a lot of ground this evening.
Thank you. I think the first one is from Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Leader, you mentioned going back and viewing council meetings. I know it's a bit sad, but I do watch a lot of council meetings back, not just from our area, but from around the whole region. And we certainly get a big variety of quality of debate and civility in debate. Peterborough City Council being a particular low note in the last month. But I would say watching the CPCA committee meetings back, I see representatives from all of the authorities working collaboratively together to try to achieve things for rural people and urban people, and actually coming to a lot of agreement together. However, when I watch back board meetings, I see something quite different. And Councillor Gray has concluded that perhaps some of the difficulties in the combined authority is on leadership. But from watching back the board meetings, I think it's something quite different. I don't think it's lack of leadership. In fact, I don't think it's even really political differences. I see some of your colleagues on the board behaving in ways that I think are unprofessional, unconstructive, and frankly, could involve some damage to the reputation of Cambridgeshire. If I was DLUC watching back some of these board meetings, I can see some of the councillors attempting to work together for the better good, but some of them make me quite embarrassed. So I'm curious how you feel like we can move forward with getting out of this best value notice without the same camaraderie coming into that board meeting from all of the members.
That's a really difficult question, and I'm going to be very careful about how I choose my words. I think it's about being really focused on the things that we can unite behind and accepting we have differences. It does require a will on behalf of each individual around that table, and I have no control over the individual's decisions or how they choose to behave or what they choose to ask, or actually quite often it's how it's said rather than what is said. Now, I have no control over that. I have responsibility for my own behaviour, and somebody's watching me and doesn't want me to continue talking. I have responsibility for my own behaviour, so I try very hard to be thoughtful about the other people around the table. I try not to point score, because I actually don't think it gets us any further forward, and I'm trying to stay resolutely focused on the big picture, which is what do we want from it, rather than the difficulties of getting there. I'm not sure it quite answers your question, but I hope it gives you a sense of my thoughts and feelings on it, on your behalf.
Thank you. Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully I'm not going to be point scoring. As always, had Councillor Gardner been here, I'm sure he'd have been on his hind legs, so I feel I'm standing in his place. But I mentioned earlier on a meeting I attended recently over in Kimbolton, where I heard residents and I heard parish council members questioning the fact we're paying taxes and we're getting less and less in return, and even some suggesting, should we stop paying tax? Now, that's a turn up for the books when you've got, mild-mannered West Cambridgeshire residents suggesting that. What was particularly getting their ire was the mayor's bus tax, you can imagine. in West Huntingdonshire, in the ward that I represent, the ward that Councillor Gray represents, and certainly the ward that Councillor Gardner represents, we get no bus services. And our residents are asking, why are we paying this tax and we get no bus services? Can I ask you, therefore, and I'm sure you will agree with me, to keep pressing the argument that we want to see better improved bus services in West Cambridgeshire? West.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cawley. You'd be surprised that if you sat in the meetings that I've sat in, we've been saying that. Some of them are not the televised meetings. Some of them are, in fact, the briefings with officers outside of that meeting. I think one of the things that we will probably want to bring back to you is we've asked them to map where our routes are. We are a beneficiary of some of that change that's coming, a much bigger beneficiary, arguably, than some areas, I suspect. The real challenge is actually, as soon as we get them, we need people on the buses, because the real challenge is it's the cost per journey. And we have a real practical challenge in our rural areas, because quite often the cost per journey is more than in an urban area. So the answer is, can I come back to you outside of this meeting? I think there's already been a bus working group. I'm looking at Councillor Davenport-Ray and Councillor Wakeford. So I think there's already been a group, and I think it continues to reach out. But certainly I think there is an open offer to engage, particularly with our two lead councillors who are working on the TIC, as in that Transport and Infrastructure Community Committee. Please engage with them, because actually we are championing that particular set of issues. We're also looking as our own authority about what else we might want to be looking for within our rural areas. So more on that, but we are... Every meeting I go into, I channel my inner Councillor Gardner. And I forever find myself saying, rural, have we talked about rural? So it is working. I know he's not here tonight, and even in his absence, we're talking about rural. So thank you very much for the question.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, this is not on a big picture. It's on a very small item, and it may be for Councillor Wakeford actually to answer, because it's on the transport minutes, and it's around the e-scooter trial update, where it was resolved to approve in principle a proposed boundary change to the existing trial area. And I just wondered whether you could reassure me whether it was just a minor change to the existing area or whether it was quite a wholesale increase.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jennings. That's one of the ones that, can I say, please can we come back to you, because I haven't got the briefing on that. And rather than ask my colleague here, who I'm sure would answer it for you, can we come back and give you a detailed briefing, please? But good question, and we will come back to you.
Councillor Hassel.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment following Councillor Davenport-Ray's comments, and also Councillor Hodgson-Jones. So I think I do support Councillor Hodgson-Jones's suggestion of the audit committee and Ovian scrutiny talking with the board, because I think that one of the things, I'm also a scrutiny rapporteur for the Environment Committee, so I concur with Councillor Davenport-Ray that the committees actually work very, very well together, and that includes the ONS. Is that the views that I've given were across ONS. It's not Councillor Nish and myself, but the rest of the committee. I just wanted to reiterate the point on governance. Is that I referred to sort of linking back to this forum. It's actually very difficult I know you're very much reflective of the opinions of within HDC, but there's nothing to stop you having completely different opinions to the opinions of the council if you so wished. And that just feels like a bit of a weakness in governance, is that you could correct that by having stronger links between the respective councils and the leaders. And you've got to have some ability to compromise, but at the first state, it would stop the kind of, I think, behaviour that Councillor Davenport-Ray was referring to, where are those people really reflecting their residents? Are they really reflecting the views of their council? So it's more of a comment than a question.
Thank you. So duly noted. I think the challenge for each of us as leaders is we choose ourselves how we represent the organisations we're there on behalf of. So heard and understood. I'm not going to comment about who should do what, but anything that strengthens our governance is always welcome. And as I say, I've already raised that with the monitoring officer. I suspect the Chief Exec, Rob Bridge, is probably watching as we speak. So good evening, Rob. And I know that he's as passionate as anybody else around that table, me included, about actually getting the combined authority to where we all collectively want it to be. So the answer is it will have been heard this evening, probably while we're broadcasting live, but I'll certainly pick it up outside of this meeting.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Again, mine's more of a comment in a way. It's going back to the scrutiny one, but you might want to add on to it, is that I think the scrutiny frustration, going back to the precept, was that there seemed to be no logic behind what the precept was. It seemed to be plucked out of the air with no direction. Yet stuff is now coming through to say, oh, now what, we might do this, and now we might do that. We might put this route or we might do that. There was very limited information as to why that precept was set at what it was. And I think that's really where the scrutiny had a problem. And of course, then it was passed to board, which I don't think it was even passed on in its completeness. So.
Thank you very much, Councillor Niche. You make a good point. That's certainly come up at the CPCA board. There are some challenges, I believe, around governance and process, around interfacing with bits of government that need to be part of this. And certainly, I think things are not moving quite as quickly as everybody would desperately like them to. But I think one of the real challenges is I'm not personally accountable for the whole of the CPA board. And nor would I profess to be. But thank you, because all of the comments tonight are really helpful. I think the challenge is where we direct them. And I think actually, whilst you're raising them here, I think they're things we need to take offline. We need to work with the Chief Exec and we need to work with the respective officers to make sure we're feeding that back in.
Do we have any further comments before I move on? You can run away quickly. Item 10, outcomes from committees and panels. This is an opportunity for you to raise any issues or ask questions arising from recent meetings of the Council's committees and panels. The same rules apply in terms of questions as I've stated previously. So do we have any other questions arising from any of the recent meetings? Councillor Teflin.
Thanks, Chair. It's been brought to the Joint Administration's attention about issues around attendance for the police and crime panel and some sub-poor attendance over the last year and which will need addressing. Thank you.
Could you just say that again, just so that it can be clear for everybody?
So it's, the representative for the police and crime panel has not attended since February 2023. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So who was that question to? Was it?
It's more of a comment, which. Yeah.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take that away from the meeting and that can be addressed. Michelle will pick that up. Any others? Councillor Gray.
Can I just raise an issue from corporate governance and want to thank all my fellow corporate governance colleagues and for those who are doing a strong job of making sure that we're all in, I'm looking around for them there, we're all engaged in the process. And I would commend particular Councillor Harvey for keeping us on our toes via WhatsApp, the modern way of being whipped, in the nicest sense of the word. One of the things that came up, and I'm conscious it's late, but one of the things that came up, and I'm trying to help Mrs. Sutton here, was around the issue of the staffing levels around procurement. A lot of the internal audit actions have procurement issues addressed against them. And for those who don't know, the procurement regulations are about to get more complicated, more demanding, and will require more people. We do not have enough people working in this area. And so I just wanted to draw that out of the minutes, place it on record before the council, look to Councillor Mickelberg to work with his relevant officers, because this does need addressing, because if we get procurement wrong, it's expensive, and we are understaffed in this area. That's the issue I'd like to raise.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
It's actually my cabinet responsibility now. Councillor Gray, but those were good observations and I completely agree with them. And I've also raised this with the Managing Director as well. And we are prepared to take action. Thank you.
Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Understanding that the Chairman of Corporate Governance isn't here tonight, but I just wanted to put on record that members will recall that at the previous council meeting we reported back about the process for appointing an independent person or more independent persons to the Corporate Governance Committee. I just wanted to advise council that that process has been ongoing. Councillor Harvey, Councillor Wells and I have been involved in that, as have a couple of other councillors. I won't divulge that the names have been selected because we've still got to go through the complete process for that. But one of the issues that flagged, and I want to draw it to attention of the full council, is that it has an impact on the structure of the committee, and therefore a working group has been set up to look at the terms of reference of the Corporate Governance Committee, because as a committee we are already a large committee, larger than you would normally have for this function, and with the addition of extra independent members we will become too unwieldy. And that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at on the terms of reference. And I just think it's an opportunity for us to look at and consider the ways that we as a council work efficiently, not just the officers, but we as councillors work efficiently in delivering proper scrutiny of the council's operations and support policy direction. It isn't just about looking back. Corporate governance isn't just looking at what we did in the past and have we done what we should have done. It's how we can move forward and how we can make ourselves more effective in the future. So I just want to draw that out as an issue that is going to come, and it will come back to full council in due course with some recommendations which we hope that you will then support.
Any other comments or questions before I move on? No. Item 11, variations to the membership of committees and panels. I will now look to group leaders to report on any variations to the membership of committees and panels. Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. Can I thank you all for your attendance and contributions? And also just to say to those of you acknowledging Easter this coming weekend, I hope it's a happy one. Our next meeting will be the annual meeting on Wednesday, the 22nd of May. And with that, I declare the meeting closed.